Our story begins on the shimmering sands of Tatooine, where the twin suns cast long shadows over the desolate dunes. Anakin Skywalker, barely 10 years old, knelt beside a battered swoop bike in Watto's junkyard, his small hands deftly twisting wires to coax life from the machine. His eyes, sharp and restless, burned with a quiet intensity, a flicker of something deeper than the dreams of a slave boy yearning for the stars. Far above, a Jedi shuttle pierced the atmosphere, its engines humming softly as it descended toward Mos Espa. Inside, Master Yoda sat in meditation, his ancient face creased with unease. The Force had stirred, whispering of a boy whose power could tip the galaxy's balance. But beneath the promise, Yoda sensed a shadow, a pulse of anger, raw and untamed, coiled within the child's heart. As the shuttle touched down, kicking up clouds of dust, Yoda's eyes opened, his gaze piercing the haze. The Jedi had come for Anakin Skywalker, but the Grand Master already feared what he might find. The streets of Mos Espa buzzed with the chaos of merchants and smugglers, but Yoda moved through them unnoticed, his small form cloaked in the Force. Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi flanked him, their steps purposeful as they approached Watto's shop. Qui-Gon had spoken of the boy's extraordinary midi-chlorian count, a number surpassing any Jedi in memory, but Yoda's focus was elsewhere. The Force around Anakin shimmered with potential, yet it was threaded with jagged streaks of darkness, fear, resentment, and a hunger for control forged in the crucible of slavery. Inside the shop, Anakin looked up from his work, sensing the strangers before he saw them. His heart raced, not with excitement, but with a wary instinct honed by years of surviving Tatooine's cruelty. When Qui-Gon explained their purpose, offering freedom and a path to the Jedi, Anakin's face lit with hope, but Yoda's eyes narrowed. The boy's joy was genuine, yet beneath it lay a spark of defiance, a refusal to be bound by fate. Yoda requested a moment alone with Anakin, and the two stepped into the quiet of Watto's cluttered back room. The air was thick with the scent of oil and rust, and Anakin stood rigid, his small frame tense under the Jedi Master's scrutiny. Yoda spoke no words, instead reaching out through the Force, probing the boy's mind. Images flashed. Anakin's mother, Shmi, her weary smile, the sting of Watto's lash, the thrill of pod racing, where control meant survival. But deeper still, Yoda found a well of anger, a vision of Anakin standing over broken chains, his hands stained with blood, not of victory, but of vengeance. The boy's fear of loss clung to him like a shadow, and Yoda felt the dark side's whisper, subtle but present, curling around Anakin's untrained power. When Yoda withdrew, Anakin's eyes met his, defiant yet vulnerable, as if he knew his secrets had been seen. Yoda's heart sank. The Chosen One was real, but so was the danger within him. The Jedi Council convened on Coruscant days later, the spires of the temple gleaming under the city's endless lights. Anakin stood before them, his small form dwarfed by the circle of masters. Qui-Gon argued passionately for the boy's training, citing his potential to bring balance, but Yoda's voice cut through the debate like a blade. The Grand Master revealed what he had sensed on Tatooine, a darkness in Anakin, not yet dominant, but potent enough to threaten all they held dear. Mace Windu leaned forward, his gaze skeptical, questioning whether a child could harbor such peril. Plo Koon suggested guidance could temper the boy's flaws, but Yoda remained firm. Training Anakin as a traditional Jedi risked amplifying his anger, yet leaving him untrained could unleash his power into the galaxy's shadows. The Council's decision was unprecedented. Anakin would be taken to the temple, not as a Padawan, but as a ward under Yoda's direct supervision. The boy's fate would be shaped not by combat, but by understanding the Force, and himself. Anakin's arrival at the Jedi Temple was met with whispers. Younglings peered curiously at the boy from Tatooine, his worn tunic a stark contrast to their pristine robes. Yoda wasted no time, guiding Anakin to a secluded meditation chamber overlooking Coruscant's skyline. The room was sparse, its walls etched with ancient Jedi runes, and the Force hummed softly within. Yoda began with simple lessons, teaching Anakin to sense the Force's flow, to quiet his mind. But the boy's thoughts were a storm. Memories of Tatooine's heat, Shmi's gentle voice, and the gnawing fear of losing her. Yoda sensed Anakin's frustration, his need to act rather than reflect. When tasked with levitating a small stone, Anakin's hand trembled, and the stone shot upward, cracking against the ceiling. His eyes flashed with anger, not at the task, but at his own failure. Yoda's voice remained calm, urging patience, but the Grand Master noted the boy's struggle. The dark side fed on such impatience, and Anakin's heart was fertile ground. Weeks turned to months, and Anakin's training took an unconventional path. Yoda forbade lightsaber practice, focusing instead on meditation, philosophy, and the history of the Force. Anakin learned of the Jedi's ancient battles, of Sith Lords who fell to their own ambition, and of Jedi who strayed but found redemption. Yoda shared tales of his own youth, of mistakes made and lessons learned, hoping to forge a bond with the boy. Yet Anakin's restlessness grew. During a lesson on Coruscant's lower levels, where Yoda taught him to sense suffering through the Force, Anakin witnessed a street child beaten by a gang. His fists clenched, and the Force surged around him, scattering the attackers without a touch. Yoda felt the boy's anger, not just at the injustice, but at his own powerlessness to fix it. The incident confirmed Yoda's fears. Anakin's compassion was real, but it was tangled with a need for control that could lead to ruin. The galaxy beyond the temple churned with tension. The Trade Federation's blockade of Naboo had escalated, and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were dispatched to negotiate. Yoda, sensing a deeper plot, kept Anakin close, refusing to let the boy's power be tested in war. But the Force had other plans. A transmission from Qui-Gon revealed a Sith warrior on Tatooine, a figure cloaked in black, wielding a red double-bladed lightsaber. Yoda's heart grew heavy. The Sith's return confirmed his suspicions of a greater darkness manipulating the galaxy, and Anakin's presence in the Force was no coincidence. The boy's potential could be a weapon for either side, and Yoda resolved to shield him from the Sith's gaze. Yet, as he watched Anakin meditate, his small form silhouetted against the temple's glowing spires, Yoda felt a chill. The shadow within Anakin was growing, fed by isolation and the weight of his own destiny. The Jedi Temple's halls glowed softly under Coruscant's twilight, their marble surfaces reflecting the city's endless streams of light. Anakin Skywalker, now 11, walked beside Yoda, his steps quick and uneven, betraying the restlessness that simmered beneath his calm exterior. The past year had been one of discipline and introspection, but the boy's heart remained a battlefield. Yoda's lessons had tempered his raw power, teaching him to channel the Force with precision, yet the shadow within him, anger, fear, and a hunger for freedom, grew sharper with each passing day. The galaxy beyond the temple was fracturing, the Naboo crisis exposing fault lines in the Republic's foundation. Reports of a Sith warrior, Darth Maul, had shaken the Jedi Council, and whispers of a hidden master lingered like smoke. Yoda sensed the threads of a grand design tightening around Anakin, and he resolved to guide the boy through the storm, even as the Force warned of dangers unseen. Anakin's training intensified, moving beyond meditation to controlled tests of his abilities. In a secluded temple courtyard, surrounded by ancient stone pillars, Yoda tasked him with navigating a maze of floating platforms, using only the Force to guide his steps. The platforms shifted unpredictably, their surfaces slick with simulated rain. Anakin's brow furrowed, his hands outstretched as he steadied each step. The Force flowed through him, bright and fierce, but when a platform tilted suddenly, threatening to cast him into the depths below, his focus shattered. A surge of frustration erupted, and the platforms trembled, one cracking under an invisible grip. Yoda's eyes narrowed, sensing the dark side's whisper in the boy's outburst. The Grand Master halted the exercise, his voice gentle but firm, urging Anakin to release his anger. The boy complied, his chest heaving, but his eyes burned with defiance, as if the Force itself mocked his restraint. Outside the temple, the galaxy spiraled toward chaos. The Senate, under Chancellor Valorum's faltering leadership, struggled to contain the Trade Federation's growing influence. Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi returned from Naboo, their faces grim as they reported Darth Maul's death at Obi-Wan's hands, but also Qui-Gon's near-fatal wound. The Sith's master remained at large, a shadow pulling strings from the Republic's heart. Yoda shared his concerns with the Council, revealing Anakin's progress and his persistent darkness. Mace Windu argued for caution, suggesting the boy be sent to a remote temple outpost, far from the war's temptations. Plo Koon countered, believing Anakin's power could be harnessed for good under strict guidance. Yoda, torn between hope and fear, chose a middle path. Anakin would remain under his tutelage, but his exposure to the galaxy would be limited, his training focused on mastering his emotions before wielding a lightsaber. Anakin's isolation chafed at him. The temple's younglings, once curious, now kept their distance, sensing his difference. During a rare group lesson, overseen by Master Jocasta Nu, Anakin partnered with a youngling named Yoda. The task was simple: sense each other's emotions through the Force. Yoda, earnest and open, reached out, but Anakin's mind was a fortress, its walls built from Tatooine's scars. When Yoda pressed deeper, brushing against memories of Shmi's suffering, Anakin recoiled, his hand lashing out instinctively. Yoda stumbled, a faint bruise forming on his arm. The chamber fell silent, younglings staring as Jocasta intervened, her voice sharp with reprimand. Yoda, observing from the shadows, felt the boy's shame, but also his anger, not at Yoda, but at himself. That night, in the meditation chamber, Yoda spoke of forgiveness, of the Jedi's duty to rise above pain. Anakin listened, but his clenched fists betrayed the storm within. The war's shadow crept closer. A distress signal from the outer rim planet of Ryloth reached the temple, reporting separatist droid armies overwhelming Twi'lek resistance. The Council dispatched Jedi Masters Kit Fisto and Aayla Secura, but Yoda sensed a deeper purpose behind the attack. The Separatists, led by the mysterious Count Dooku, were testing the Republic's resolve, and the Force hinted at Sith involvement. Against his better judgment, Yoda allowed Anakin to accompany him on a covert mission to Ryloth, not as a combatant, but as an observer. The boy's connection to the Force could reveal truths hidden from seasoned Jedi, but Yoda vowed to keep him from battle. Their shuttle slipped through hyperspace, its hull vibrating with the hum of distant stars. Anakin sat silently, his eyes fixed on the swirling blue tunnels, his mind racing with visions of heroism and vengeance. Yoda watched him, feeling the boy's excitement laced with a dangerous thrill. Ryloth's surface was a scarred tapestry of red rock and burning villages. The Jedi landed in a concealed canyon, joining Kit Fisto's small strike team. Anakin's eyes widened at the sight of blaster fire streaking across the horizon, droid battalions clashing with Twi'lek guerrillas. Yoda instructed him to remain at the camp, tasked with repairing comms equipment, a test of discipline. But as the Jedi moved to intercept a droid convoy, Anakin's gaze followed, his heart pounding with the call of action. The Force pulsed around him, amplifying his senses, and he felt the pain of a wounded Twi'lek nearby. Against Yoda's orders, he slipped from the camp, following the cry. He found a young Twi'lek girl, her leg trapped under rubble, surrounded by advancing B-1 battle droids. Anakin's hand moved instinctively, the force surging as he hurled the droids into a canyon wall, their metal frames crumpling like paper. The girl was safe, but Yoda's presence loomed behind him, the Grand Master's eyes heavy with disappointment. The return to Coruscant was silent. Yoda confined Anakin to the temple, forbidding further missions. The boy's act had saved a life, but his defiance revealed the depth of his impulsiveness. In the council chamber, Yoda faced scrutiny. Mace Windu questioned whether Anakin's training was failing, while Shock Tai urged patience, citing the boy's compassion. Yoda remained resolute, but doubt gnawed at him. The Force was shifting, its currents darkened by an unseen hand. A new transmission arrived, this time from Senator Palpatine, now Chancellor after Valorum's ousting. Palpatine requested a meeting with Yoda, expressing concern for the Jedi's role in the escalating war. Yoda sensed deception in the Chancellor's words, a subtle pull toward the dark side. He declined the meeting, choosing instead to deepen Anakin's training, introducing him to ancient Jedi texts on balance and sacrifice. Anakin devoured the stories, but his questions grew sharper, probing the Jedi's limits, their refusal to act decisively against injustice. Months later, a crisis on Geonosis forced Yoda's hand. The Republic uncovered a separatist droid factory, guarded by Count Dooku himself. The Council planned a large-scale assault, led by Mace Windu and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yoda, sensing a trap, decided to join them, but Anakin's role remained contentious. The boy, now 12, pleaded to prove himself, his eyes blazing with determination. Yoda relented, allowing him to accompany the mission as a healer, aiding clone medics under Master Luminara Unduli's supervision. The decision weighed heavily on Yoda, who felt the Force's warning grow louder. Geonosis's red sands stretched endlessly before the Republic's landing zone, gunships roaring as clones deployed in precise formations. Anakin stayed at the rear, his hands steady as he applied Bacta to wounded troopers, but his eyes darted to the horizon, where lightsabers flashed against the dusk. The battle erupted with ferocity. Mace Windu's purple blade carved through droid ranks, while Obi-Wan and Kit Fisto flanked Dooku's forces. Yoda moved like a whirlwind, his green saber a blur as he deflected blaster bolts and dismantled droidekas. Anakin watched from the medical tent, his heart racing as the Force pulsed with the clash of light and dark. Dooku, cloaked in black, stood atop a cliff, his red saber slashing with elegant precision. The Jedi pressed forward, but Dooku's strategy unfolded. A hidden battalion of super battle droids ambushed the clones, cutting off their retreat. Anakin's hands trembled, the screams of dying troopers echoing in his mind. Without thinking, he seized a fallen clone's blaster, slipping into the fray. The Force guided his aim, felling droids with unnatural accuracy, but his eyes burned with a fire Yoda recognized too well. The Grand Master intervened, pulling Anakin back with a wave of his hand, but not before Dooku's gaze locked onto the boy, a flicker of interest crossing the Sith's face. The battle's tide turned as Yoda confronted Dooku directly. Their sabers clashed in a storm of green and red, the Force rippling around them. Dooku's strikes were measured, probing Yoda's defenses, while the Grand Master flipped and spun, his small form defying gravity. Below, Anakin watched, his breath ragged, the blaster still warm in his hands. The sight of Yoda's power stirred something in him, awe, but also envy. Why was he held back when he could fight like that? The thought was fleeting, but Yoda felt it, a crack in the boy's resolve. Dooku, sensing the distraction, hurled a boulder at Yoda, forcing the Jedi to leap aside. The Sith retreated, vanishing into a waiting shuttle, but not before casting a final glance at Anakin, as if marking him for the future. The Jedi secured Geonosis, but the victory was hollow. Yoda's heart grew heavier, knowing the Sith had seen Anakin's potential, and his darkness. Back at the temple, Yoda confronted Anakin in the meditation chamber. The boy stood defiant, arguing he had saved lives, but Yoda's voice was stern, warning of the path his anger could lead to. Anakin's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with frustration, insisting he only wanted to help. Yoda softened, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, but his mind raced. The Sith's interest in Anakin was no accident, and the Chancellor's subtle overtures, invitations to meet the heroic boy, hinted at a deeper game. Yoda resolved to shield Anakin further, assigning Obi-Wan Kenobi as a secondary mentor, hoping the young Jedi's compassion could balance the boy's fire. As night fell over Coruscant, Anakin sat alone, staring at the city's lights. The battle's climax came swiftly. The Force whispered to him, not of peace but of power, and for the first time, he listened. The Clone Wars erupted across the galaxy, a tempest of fire and steel that tore through star systems. Coruscant's skies, once serene, now thrummed with Republic gunships and Jedi transports. Anakin Skywalker, now 14, stood on a temple balcony, his eyes tracing the trails of warships vanishing into the dawn. Yoda's training had honed his connection to the Force, but the shadow within him burned brighter, fed by the war's chaos and whispers of his own destiny. The Jedi Council, stretched thin by battles, relied on Yoda's judgment to keep Anakin from the front lines, but the Sith's gaze had found him. Count Dooku's interest on Geonosis had reached his master, Darth Sidious, hidden in plain sight as Chancellor Palpatine. The Sith Lord sensed Anakin's power, a blade that could carve empires or shatter them. As Republic forces clashed with Separatist fleets, a trap was set, not on a distant world, but in the heart of Coruscant, where Anakin's fate would be decided. Yoda felt the Force's warning, a cold ripple that shook his meditation. Reports of Separatist sabotage in Coruscant's industrial sector reached the temple, hinting at a plot to cripple the Republic's war machine. The Council dispatched Obi-Wan Kenobi and Mace Windu to investigate, but Yoda sensed a deeper purpose. Palpatine, ever the orchestrator, requested Anakin's presence at a Senate gala, citing the boy's unique perspective on the war. Yoda forbade it, his voice sharp, but Anakin's defiance flared. The boy slipped from the temple at dusk, his cloak blending with Coruscant's crowds, drawn to the Chancellor's invitation like a moth to flame. Yoda, sensing the betrayal, followed, his small form a shadow among the city's spires. The gala's lights glittered in the Senate district, but beneath the surface, a darker game unfolded. Anakin entered the grand hall, its chandeliers casting golden hues over senators and Jedi alike. Palpatine greeted him, his smile warm but predatory, guiding the boy to a private balcony overlooking the city. The Chancellor spoke of the Jedi's failures, their rigid code stifling true power. Anakin listened, his heart pounding, the words echoing his own frustrations. The Force around him twisted, Palpatine's presence a subtle poison, stirring the anger Yoda had fought to suppress. As the gala hummed below, a distant explosion rocked the industrial sector. Alarms blared, and Jedi scattered to respond, but Yoda's focus remained on Anakin. The Grand Master slipped through the crowd, his cane tapping softly, his senses locked on the boy's turbulent aura. Palpatine's words grew bolder, hinting at a path where Anakin could protect those he loved. Shmi, the galaxy, without the Jedi's chains. Anakin's hand twitched, the dark side's pull tightening its grip. The trap sprang in the industrial sector. Obi-Wan and Mace Windu, leading a clone battalion, breached a derelict factory, expecting droid saboteurs. Instead, Count Dooku awaited, his red saber igniting with a hiss. Flanked by Magna Guards, their electrostaffs crackling, Dooku struck, his blade a blur of crimson. Mace's purple saber met him, sparks flying as their duel tore through rusted catwalks. Obi-Wan deflected Magna Guard strikes, his blue blade carving through metal, but the factory's walls shuddered, revealing a second threat. Asajj Ventress, Dooku's assassin, emerged from the shadows, her twin red sabers spinning. The Jedi fought back to back, clones falling under Ventress's relentless assault. Above, in the Senate Hall, Anakin felt the battle through the Force, his vision blurring with images of Obi-Wan's struggle. Palpatine's voice whispered, urging him to act, to save his mentor. Anakin bolted from the balcony, ignoring Yoda's distant call, his feet pounding toward the speeder bays. Yoda pursued, his small form leaping across rooftops, the Force propelling him through Coruscant's neon-lit canyons. Anakin's speeder roared into the industrial sector, weaving through smoke and debris. The factory loomed ahead, its walls glowing with the heat of battle. Anakin crashed through a shattered window, landing amidst the chaos. Dooku's saber slashed at Mace, who parried with ferocious precision, while Obi-Wan grappled with Ventress, their blades locked in a deadly dance. Anakin's arrival drew Dooku's gaze, a smirk curling the Sith's lips. The boy had no lightsaber, but the Force surged around him, raw and untamed. He hurled a steel beam at Dooku, the metal screeching as it narrowly missed. Mace shouted for Anakin to retreat, but the boy charged, his hands outstretched, the Force bending the air. Ventress lunged, her sabers aimed at Anakin's chest, but Yoda arrived, his green blade igniting to deflect the blow. The factory became a maelstrom of light and shadow. Yoda's saber spun, a verdant whirlwind blocking Ventress's strikes. Mace and Dooku dueled across a collapsing platform, their blades searing through metal. Obi-Wan disarmed a Magna Guard, his saber slicing through its core, but Ventress's ferocity pushed him back. Anakin, caught in the chaos, unleashed a wave of Force energy, shattering a wall and sending droids tumbling. His eyes glowed with a faint yellow hue, the dark side feeding on his rage. Yoda sensed the shift, his heart sinking as he parried Ventress's blades. Dooku, seizing the moment, hurled lightning at Mace, who deflected it with his saber, the purple light flaring. Anakin, seeing Obi-Wan stagger under Ventress's assault, roared, the Force erupting from him. The ceiling buckled, debris raining down, and Ventress was thrown back, her sabers skittering across the floor. Dooku's voice cut through the chaos, taunting Anakin, calling him the Jedi's weapon, destined to break. The boy's anger surged, and he lunged, seizing a fallen Magna Guard's electrostaff. He swung wildly, the staff clashing against Dooku's saber, sparks flying. Yoda shouted for Anakin to stop, but the boy was deaf to reason, his strikes fueled by years of suppressed pain. Mace joined Yoda, their sabers forcing Ventress into retreat, but Dooku held his ground, his blade parrying Anakin's clumsy blows with ease. Palpatine's presence lingered in the Force, a distant shadow amplifying Anakin's fury. The factory's core began to overheat, warning klaxons blaring as flames licked the walls. Yoda leaped between Anakin and Dooku, his saber blocking a lethal strike. The Grand Master's voice pierced the boy's rage, urging him to find balance. Anakin hesitated, the electrostaff trembling in his hands, his eyes flickering between defiance and doubt. Mace disarmed Ventress, his saber grazing her arm, forcing her to flee into the shadows. Dooku, cornered, unleashed a torrent of lightning, aiming for Anakin. Yoda deflected it, the green blade absorbing the energy, but the effort staggered him. Anakin, seeing Yoda falter, dropped the staff, the Force surging as he pushed Dooku back, pinning the Sith against a wall. The factory's core exploded in a cascade of fire, the blast wave knocking everyone to the ground. Dooku vanished in the chaos, his shuttle streaking into the sky. Anakin lay amidst the rubble, his breath ragged, the yellow in his eyes fading. Yoda rose, his cloak singed, his gaze heavy with sorrow. Obi-Wan and Mace secured the area, clones extinguishing fires, but the victory was hollow. Anakin's power had saved them, but his darkness had nearly consumed him. As the Jedi returned to the temple, Anakin's silence was deafening. Yoda walked beside him, the city's lights casting long shadows. The boy's actions had thwarted the separatist plot, but the cost was clear. Palpatine's influence, Dooku's taunts, and Anakin's own anger had pushed him to the edge. Yoda knew the Sith's trap had been for Anakin, not the Jedi, a test of his vulnerability. The council convened in the aftermath, their faces grim. Mace demanded Anakin's training cease, citing the danger he posed. Obi-Wan defended him, arguing his courage outweighed his flaws. Yoda remained silent, his mind racing. The Force whispered of a choice: bind Anakin to the Jedi's path or set him free, risking the Sith's claim. As dawn broke over Coruscant, Yoda led Anakin to the meditation chamber, the boy's fate hanging in the balance, the galaxy's future teetering on a knife's edge. The Jedi Temple stood silent under Coruscant's dawn, its spires catching the first rays of light like sentinels of a weary galaxy. The Clone Wars raged on, but within the temple's walls, a quieter battle had reached its end. Anakin Skywalker, now 15, sat cross-legged in the meditation chamber, his hands resting on his knees, his breath steady but heavy with the weight of the past year. The industrial sector's chaos lingered in his mind. Dooku's taunts, Palpatine's whispers, and the yellow fire in his own eyes as he teetered on the dark side's edge. Yoda stood before him, his small form framed by the chamber's arched window, the city's endless glow a distant hum. The Grand Master's gaze was soft, yet piercing, carrying centuries of wisdom and the burden of a choice that could reshape the Force itself. Anakin's fate, and the galaxy's, rested in this moment of reckoning. The Council's debate over Anakin had grown heated in the aftermath of the factory battle. Mace Windu, his voice sharp, insisted the boy be exiled to a remote world, his power too volatile for the Jedi's ranks. Obi-Wan Kenobi countered fiercely, citing Anakin's courage and loyalty, pleading for a chance to guide him. Plo Koon and Shak Tai urged reform, suggesting the Jedi adapt their teachings to embrace Anakin's unique spirit. Yoda listened, his heart torn between fear and hope. The Force swirled around Anakin, a tempest of light and shadow, its currents hinting at a destiny neither wholly Jedi nor Sith. Yoda's decision came not from debate, but from a vision in the Force, a fleeting image of Anakin standing on a cliff, his face calm, the galaxy at peace behind him. The path was perilous, but possible. Yoda chose to trust the boy, and the Jedi, to forge a new way. Anakin's training shifted profoundly. Yoda, with Obi-Wan's aid, crafted a regimen that embraced the boy's emotions rather than suppressing them. In the temple's gardens, where vines curled around ancient stones, Anakin learned to channel his anger into focus, his fear into compassion. Yoda guided him through meditations that explored his past, Shmi's sacrifice, Tatooine's cruelty, teaching him to honor those pains without letting them rule. Obi-Wan, now a brother as much as a mentor, shared stories of his own struggles, of doubts faced and overcome. Anakin's hands, once clenched in defiance, began to relax, his connection to the Force growing clearer, less volatile. The Council watched closely, their skepticism easing as Anakin's outbursts faded, replaced by a quiet strength. Yet Yoda knew the Sith's shadow loomed, and Palpatine's interest in the boy had not waned. The Chancellor's influence grew subtler, his invitations to Anakin cloaked in kindness, private meetings to discuss the war, gifts of rare holocrons. Yoda intercepted each attempt, shielding Anakin while investigating Palpatine's motives. The Force around the Chancellor was clouded, a veil of deception that resisted even Yoda's probing. A breakthrough came unexpectedly on Kamino, where Shak Ti uncovered records of a clone army commissioned under a false name, Sifo Dyas, with funds traced to Coruscant's elite. Yoda shared the findings with Obi-Wan and Mace, their suspicions converging on Palpatine. The Jedi laid a trap, leaking false intelligence of a Jedi assault on Mustafar, a separatist stronghold. If Palpatine was Sidious, he would warn Dooku. When the Chancellor's private shuttle departed Coruscant, tracked by Obi-Wan's stealth ship, the truth emerged. Palpatine landed on Mustafar, greeted by Dooku and a cadre of battle droids. The Jedi struck swiftly. Yoda, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan, and Kit Fisto descended on Mustafar's volcanic plains, their gunship weaving through ash-laden skies. Anakin, against Yoda's wishes, had stowed aboard, his presence undetected until the landing. The boy's eyes widened at the sight of molten rivers and jagged obsidian peaks, the planet's fury mirroring his own past. Yoda relented, assigning Anakin to guard the ship with clones of the 212th, but the Force pulsed with danger. Inside a separatist fortress, Palpatine and Dooku convened, their voices low as they plotted the war's next phase. The Jedi breached the perimeter, their sabers igniting in a blaze of green, purple, and blue. Mace charged Dooku, their blades clashing with thunderous force, while Yoda and Obi-Wan faced Palpatine, his red sabers spinning in a crimson storm. Kit Fisto flanked the droids, his green blade slicing through metal, but the Sith's power was overwhelming. Anakin, at the ship, felt the battle's intensity through the Force. Visions of Obi-Wan falling, Yoda faltering, flooded his mind. His heart raced, the dark side whispering of power to save them. He resisted, clinging to Yoda's teachings, but the pull was fierce. A droid patrol ambushed the clones, blaster bolts searing the air. Anakin reacted instinctively, the Force surging as he crushed the droids, their frames crumpling. His eyes flickered yellow, but he steadied himself, remembering the temple's gardens, Obi-Wan's voice. He ran toward the fortress, determined to help, not to destroy. Inside, the battle raged. Mace disarmed Dooku, his saber grazing the Sith's shoulder, but Palpatine's lightning drove Yoda back, the Grand Master's small form skidding across the floor. Obi-Wan parried Palpatine's strikes, but a blast of Force energy hurled him into a wall, his saber clattering away. Anakin burst into the chamber, his presence a shockwave in the Force. Palpatine's eyes gleamed, sensing opportunity, but Anakin's focus was on Yoda, struggling to rise. The boy extended his hand, the Force lifting the Grand Master to safety. Palpatine laughed, his voice a venomous hiss, taunting Anakin's restraint, promising power to end the war. Anakin's fists clenched, the dark side roaring within, but he saw Yoda's eyes, calm and trusting. With a cry, Anakin unleashed the Force, not in anger, but in protection, hurling debris to shield the Jedi. Mace seized the moment, his saber slashing through Dooku's guard, felling the Sith with a final strike. Yoda and Obi-Wan rallied, their blades converging on Palpatine. The Chancellor fought with feral intensity, lightning crackling, but Anakin's intervention had shifted the tide. Yoda's saber pierced Palpatine's chest, the red blades falling silent as the Sith Lord collapsed, his body dissolving into shadow. The fortress trembled, its core destabilized by the battle's ferocity. The Jedi fled, Anakin supporting Obi-Wan as clones covered their retreat. Mustafar's skies burned red as their gunship soared away, the fortress exploding in a cascade of fire and ash. Aboard the ship, Anakin sat silently, his hands trembling, the weight of his choice settling in. Yoda placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice soft, acknowledging the boy's strength in resisting the dark side. Obi-Wan, bruised but alive, offered a nod of pride. Mace, ever cautious, remained silent, but his gaze softened. The galaxy, unaware of the Sith's defeat, continued its war, but a new hope dawned. Palpatine's death sent ripples through the separatist ranks, their leadership fracturing without Dooku's charisma or Sidious's cunning. In the weeks that followed, the Jedi presented evidence of Palpatine's treachery to the Senate, compiled from Mustafar's databanks and Kamino's records. Bail Organa, appointed interim chancellor, called for peace talks, inviting separatist senators to Alderaan. Padme Amidala, her voice steady, championed reform, urging the Republic to heal its divides. The Clone Wars slowed, battles giving way to negotiations as worlds weary of conflict sought reconciliation. The Jedi Order, humbled by its blindness to Sidious, embraced change. Yoda stepped down as Grand Master, passing the role to Mace Windu, who vowed to guide the Jedi with openness. Obi-Wan took Anakin as his formal Padawan, their bond forged in trust. Anakin, now free to visit Shmi on Tatooine, found peace in her embrace, his fear of loss easing with each reunion. Years later, Anakin stood on a Coruscant balcony, his Jedi robes catching the breeze. The galaxy was not perfect. Pirates raided trade lanes, politics simmered, but peace held. The Jedi, no longer bound to rigid dogma, served as guardians among the people, their temples open to all. Anakin, a knight under Obi-Wan's mentorship, trained younglings with patience, his own darkness a lesson in balance. Yoda, now a quiet advisor, watched from the temple gardens, his eyes bright with hope. The Force flowed freely, its light unclouded by Sith schemes. Anakin's gaze drifted to the stars, where Ahsoka Tano, a new Padawan, trained under Plo Koon, and Padme led Senate reforms. The Chosen One had not fallen, but risen, his heart a bridge between light and shadow, his legacy a galaxy reborn. And folks, that's our story. This one was a ride, inspired by the idea of Yoda's wisdom catching Anakin's struggles early. I loved exploring how love and trust could reshape a hero's path. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next tale.